Hi guys, it's Sam for Digital Me, and in this tutorial we're going to take a look at projection mapping. And what this technique is going to do is, it should give us a result akin to something like this. Let's start that again, it jerked a little bit. So obviously we've got 3D elements in there in what looks like a piece of footage or something like that, really, but this is actually it's actually been created from a photograph. So I suppose the best way of explaining this is just to jump straight in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a camera, just a normal camera. Also, actually, before I do that, we should probably set up our scene. Now, the photograph I took with my phone, and I know that its ratio is 16:9. So I don't know if I choose HD 24 frames a second. So this is actually 1080. So that'd be absolutely fine. I can drop that down to well, because I've locked the ratio, I could drop it down to something like 800, just so when we render, it renders a lot quicker. But in your, when you do your final renders, it could be at full 1080 or 720, whatever you like. So we'll leave it for that at the moment. In fact, while we're there, we might as well sap our render settings. So I'm going to choose the physical renderer. Go to the physical tab. Again, I'm going to keep it adaptive, keep it on automatic. Maybe drop this down to 15, and I think that should do us for now. Okay, right. Just so we can see where is out of bounds of our render as well, I'm just going to go to configure in this menu, and then I'm going to go to view here, and the opacity is 10%. I'm going to whack that up to 880, something like that, so we can just see where what lies outside of our render there. Okay, cool. Right, first things first, create a camera. So that's in there, and then we're going to right click on the camera, go to Cinema 4D tags, go down to the camera calibrator, and it'll give us this little tag here. We're on the basic tab here, it's just this tab. Now if we go along to image, it'll actually ask what's our source, what's our image. So if I click on that, I've actually got an image somewhere. Where did I put it? It might be my textures folder. Yeah, so this is the image that I took with my phone. It loads it into this scene. Now what can we at the bottom here, you've got full image, match width, match height. You notice that it says image scale here 99.9%, but if I click on match width, it's at 100% of its width. So I think I'll just keep it on that, and it should be 16:9 because that's what I took the image with, actually. So if it's custom, yeah, 16:9, that'll be fine. No lens profile in there. My lens on my phone doesn't distort the image enough for me to worry about that. Anyway, let's move on. If we go to the calibrate tab, this is where we can work out our camera, because if I had a cube and then go back to the now this may cause problems. We'll get to that in a minute, actually. So let's go to the calibrate screen. We basically want to tell Cinema what's up, what's down, all the rest of it. And in fact, if I go back to the configure, I think by default this was 10%, yeah. You can see the grid in the background here. In fact, if I click off, it doesn't match what our floor's doing whatsoever. And in the calibrate tab here, this is where we can kind of solve that. So we've got to give it some pointers so it can solve what the X is, what the Y is, and what the Z is. And then from that, it can solve the camera's focal length, the orientation, where it's positioned in the world, all that kind of thing. So let's get started. First of all, we're going to click on Add Line, and I'm going to put this line on the wall here, and then I'm going to grab the other point, and I'm going to make sure it matches the line of that wall all the way up to there. Now we need to tell Cinema what this line is. So if you hold the Shift key and then click on the line, if you just click on it normally, nothing happens. So you've got to hold the Shift key and click it. Now you can see it goes red here. Now if you look in our corner here, you can see that red is representing X, blue is representing Z, and Y is green. So we know this is up, so we know it's Y. So we want to click through until it turns green. So there we go. You can see nothing's been solved here because it hasn't got enough information. So that's one line. Let's add another one. And let's use the edge of the fireplace here. Now I'm not going to be too accurate because obviously we want to get through this tutorial today. So when you do it, you can be a lot more accurate. So we can see that it's gone yellow. Really we want this to go green, so it still needs more information, so we'll keep adding lines. In fact, let's what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the actual the lines on the floorboards here as a positional tool as well. So I'm going to put that there, and then the other end is going to go here. And we're going to call this X, which in our case is red, so that's correct. Let's add another line. Let's put this here. Okay, click that through, that's another X. Okay, so we're starting to get a bit more solved now, and obviously the more you've got in there, the better the solve. So let's whack another one here. And these floorboards, they're not necessarily going to be, totally accurate. The floorboards might be wonky for all I know, but we'll keep going and see how we do. Now we've got our X solved within 0.006, which is actually, it's not bad. So let's keep adding lines, I suppose. Right, let's go give ourselves some Z direction. So this is going to be sort of like the depth going through the scene. Now, you probably think, why aren't you using this table? It's because the room is probably a better source to do this, because this table could be rotated slightly. It's not necessarily going to be in line with the room. So I'm going to use this line on the tiling here. I'm assuming it's in line with the room. May not be, but so we'll turn that to blue. There we go. Let's add another line. I'm going to use the edge of this as well. Turn that blue. Let's add another line. I'm going to use the edge of the mantelpiece here. So you keep going through like that. That's blue. The Y, everything's been solved. The Y vanishing point hasn't been solved yet, and also the Z is a little bit higher than it. So I'm going to add another line. I think I'm going to use the I suppose the radiator could be mounted wonky, but I'm going to assume that the wall's straight and that the radiator is attached to the wall. So I'm going to assume that it's correct. Okay, so we've got a better Z vanishing point now. The Y, it still needs some more information. So I'm going to add a line. What I was saying about the table earlier, obviously this could be rotated, so it's this may not represent Z because it could be, slightly rotated, and this may not represent X, but it doesn't matter how this table's orientated, any upline will still be up. That's just the way it works, so you're okay using that as a reference for your Y. In fact, yeah, so whack that on, Come on, there we go. There we go. I'm going to add another line. Maybe do the other side of it. Right on the edge there. Pull this down a bit so just we get a bit more length in there. And flip that to Y as well. Is there anything else in this room that we could use for a Y solve? Suppose we could use the other end of the table. We go right on the edge there. Come on. There we go. There we go. I think I'm probably going to use the fireplace again. This and this. Suppose that'll do. I'm not really happy about those numbers, so maybe the edge of this speaker as well. Doesn't seem to be wanting to. Now this is coming up as an outlier. I don't know where that is. Okay, let's use the edge of this. That might help us. Although, there we go. Actually, this darker line here is probably going to be better for us. Oh, nearly that. There we go. Again, it's saying outlier, so it's saying that that's not helpful to our solve. Okay, maybe I'll pick this line here then and see what we get from that. Again, we're getting another outlier. Okay, this may be a problem. Okay, let's select our Y lines and get rid of them. Because I think that we might be hitting problems. So let's get rid of all our Y lines. The rest seem to, oh, okay, the vanishing point has been indirectly solved. Now that is interesting. Obviously, that it had enough information from the Z and X, and it's solved the Y indirectly. So it's saying it's green. The camera position's been isn't solved though. So let's add a pin. This is basically going to sort of determine world 0. So you want to put it somewhere where you're creating objects, they're going to appear at that place. So I'm going to add a pin. I don't know where that pin got put actually. Let's delete the pin. Oh, I see where it was. It's right here. So let's say that, I don't know. Let's say that this is world 0. Right on the corner there. Okay. So we've got an assumed distance there. Actually, let's delete our pin. I'm going to add a line, and I am going to add it to this. And make this a Y. And I'm going to give it a known length. I'm going to say that this is maybe 40 centimeters. Then I'm going to add a pin. I'm going to place that pin at that place. Okay, so everything looks good. Everything's solved. Right, okay, so now obviously if I click off the camera, let's get into this camera now and click on the tag. You can kind of see the floor is now matched up with the photos floor there. But obviously when you click off this tag, the picture disappears. So We don't want that. We want a reference in the background. So it's got this button here that says create background object. So it creates a background object, and it also makes this material for it. We can turn the reflectance off. I'm going to call this background. Makes sense. So when we come out of that tag, we can see that that grid is sort of aligned with our floor now. And you can see these lines are going along with the mantelpiece. So is this one. This one's pretty close. So that's about right. We solved our scene. So let's dump an object in there. So we dump an object in there. That's way, way big. So let's bring it down to, I don't know, 50 by 50. Put something in there like that. It looks like it's sitting on the floor. We render it. It's not very believable. Of course it isn't. In fact, what I'm going to do also is, let's go back to the tag here. We've got a create camera mapping tag. If I click that, it creates this sort of material, this texture tag, and it also creates this material. You can see it's named it after the name of the photo. I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm going to call it projection. Let's turn off the reflectance. And that is in the, you notice that the background object, it made it in the color channel. In this projection material, it made it in the luminance channel. I'll talk about that in a minute. Right. So let's get back to this thing that I made here. Right, this cube. Now, if I add this material to the cube, you'll see that the cube looks like it's disappeared. What's actually happening, if I come out of this and turn the background off, you can see that the text, if we go back to the camera view, you can turn this background on and off. It's basically taken the texture that we've got here and it's actually projecting it out of this camera. I don't want this camera to move actually, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to call this projection camera, and just so I can't move it, I'm going to put a tag on it. If you go to Cinema 4D tags, go down to protection. So basically what this means is if I come out the camera, I'll turn my background off so it's not so distracting. If I try and grab this camera now, I can't move it, I can't rotate it, it's safe. I can't knock it out of place. So you want to put this tag on there because we calibrated everything, and it's figured out the camera's position, so you don't want it to move. So just in case accidents may happen, put this protection tag on it, and that'll sort that problem out. Okay, so this camera's projecting out, and this cube has got this material on it. If we have a look at the material tag, we can see that the projection is set to camera mapping. Then it'll ask, well, what camera do you want me to use as a reference? And obviously we want to use this projection camera as a reference, so that gets dragged into here, and it figures out the film aspect and the pixel aspect. But obviously in this, you could do that manually, but they're very kindly in the camera calibrator tag made this button, create camera mapping tag. So that sort of solved that issue. And I can show you what this is doing by going into this and changing the projection method to spherical. And you can see our box in our scene has got a different kind of mapping on it now. And if I go to that and choose flat or any other cubic, you can see how that has changed. But obviously what we want is the camera mapping we had before. Okay, so what we're basically trying to do is have 3D objects interact with our scene, but there is no scene because it's just a picture. It's on this background object, it's just a picture. Let's move that off of our cube for a moment. And if I rendered this, it's not going to look very realistic. So I want to light this cube in a manner which makes it look like it's in the scene. So I'm going to create a new material. I'm going to call this material Sky, turn off the colour and the reflectance channels, turn on my luminance channel, and I'm going to drop a texture in there. I don't know why it went to that. There we go. Okay, so it's asking me to... I made this texture. I actually used this in a previous tutorial. And what it is a... It's a 360 of my living room. And you can actually create these. I actually used an app called Photosynth on my phone. There's other apps that do this. I think there's an app called 360. It basically lets you take a series of photos in a 360 sort of orbit. And then it stitches them together so you can create this kind of material. So that's what I used. So we got our material now. I've called this Sky, purely because I'm going to create a sky object. So we go up to the environmental objects, select Sky. This will actually override the background because it's on top of the stack. If I moved it, no, it still overrides it. Okay, so grab this Sky material, put it on our Sky. It looks very blurry there. If we go down to this, go down to the editor and change this to, I don't know, 2K, something like that. It might even be bigger than that, but no, I think that's all you're going to get out of there. Right, now this sky object obviously needs to be aligned so it will kind of match the lighting in our room, but we haven't got anything in there yet, so I'm not gonna worry too much about that. So this sky object, I'm going to put a Cinema 4D compositing tag on it and tell it that it's not seen by camera, but it's seen in every other respect, so it can still shit out GI rays and all of that kind of stuff. It just won't be rendered, so I'm going to turn that off and we can see our background again now. Okay, so that's something that I should look at in these as well, actually. Let's just so the quality of the textures are a lot better. I think we should be alright though. Yep, cool. Actually, this background material, it's dumped it in the color channel, but really we probably want to copy this and just copy channel and dump it in the luminance channel. Let's paste the channel there. There we go. So let's turn off color, turn on luminance, because not that it made much of a difference, to be honest. It's probably because it's on a background object. Who knows? Okay. So yeah, it's definitely on there. So this background is definitely on the background. Okay, so we've got the luminance channel because it's basically our back plate, and this projection one. This actually wants to be in our... I'm going to copy the channel, turn off luminance, and put it in our color channel. Where is it? Paste channel. There we go. So that's what's being projected out onto our cube. Ooh. So, okay, right. Now our cube. Let's put that on there. Okay, now you can see that the cube isn't quite blending into the background because it's obviously receiving default lighting from Cinema 4D. We actually haven't got any lighting in there whatsoever yet. So let's... yeah, it's got the right tag on it. Sorry, I'm fart-arsing around here a little bit. Okay, cool. Right, lighting, I suppose. Well, first of all, let's get... we'll leave that cube there for a minute. Let's create a plane. Okay, so this plane is going to be our floor. So I'm just going to make it a lot bigger. It doesn't matter if it looks like it's bleeding over the edges of the walls or whatever, because we're going to be we're going to be building the walls in a minute. Now, when you create a plane in Cinema 4D, it does create a world 0, so we know this is flat to the ground in Cinema 4D. So that's where we want our... I'm going to get rid of this cube a minute. That's where we're going to want our floor. Now I'm going to call this plane floor. Okay. And if we render now, you can actually see the line of the floor in the picture, which is no good. So what we do is Cinema 4D tags, go down to compositing, and then we'd click composite in background. So this would basically blend this in with our background material, this background here. So if we click that on and then render again, blends totally in, but there's definitely a flaw there. Now, obviously, for every single item that we're going to create, we don't want to have to put this tag on and put this texture tag on. So what we're going to do is, I'm going to go to create at the top here, make an object, and it's a null object. So basically, this object has got no volume. It doesn't have a size as such, but it does have a coordinates. So it's 0, 0, 0 in X, Y, and Z. And if you see up here, it's called null. So I'm just going to call this null scene items. And then I'm going to put the floor within it. And then I'm going to take the tags for the floor, which is this compositing tag and this texture tag, which is the projection material, and I'll put that on the null as well. And then that way, everything that we put inside of this as a child of it, so it's kind of like this is a group header and these things are going to be its children, they will inherit what these two tags are doing on the null object. So we don't have to duplicate these. It'll just bleed down the stack and do that. So I can do that with a cube now. So if I create a cube again, make it 50 by 50 by 50 centimeters. Well, that's obviously, that's its coordinates. Excuse me. Let me zero those out again. I'll just shrink it down to 50 by 50. There we go. Now you can see it's actually clipping through the floor, and that's because the pivot point, if I come out of the projection here, in fact, let's turn off the background as well. The cube's pivot point is actually in the center of the cube, and that's and it creates the object at world 0. Now, we typically don't want this. We want it to be sitting on the floor. So we know that the cube is 50 centimeters tall, and this is halfway in the middle of the cube. So it means that we can just half this amount in the coordinates, which is 25, and then it'll be sitting on the floor. This is actually going to be quite important later, but for the time being, we'll go back to our camera that's protected. We'll see what we got. So there we go. Now again, this cube still doesn't look like it belongs in the scene. Let's just make it a little bit more interesting. It doesn't look believable, really. So this sky object that we talked about earlier, I'm just going to turn this back on. This is what's going to light our scene. And now we've got a plane in there as well. That actually helps us with our orientation, because we know that the table's here and the window. In fact, we could get a wall in there just to show that, but I'm not going to worry about that too much. Yeah, let's get that in there. Right, so I'm going to hide the sky for a moment. So I'm going to use a compositing tag. Let's build a wall. So we'll put a plane in there. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees in this direction. Then I'm going to push it back. Okay, till it meets the edge there. That'll do me nicely. Let's get our lines on as well, so I can see what's going on. And we've got width and height segments here. We don't need 20, we just need 1. So that's fine. So that's intersecting with the floor. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to make this editable. I'm going to grab the I'm going to grab this edge here. I'm just going to shift it along there. In fact, so we can see what we're doing. There we go. So it meets up there. Then I'm going to drag. I'm going to control and drag this out, and that'll give us a another segment. And then I'm going to move it until it meets that edge. I'm going to click this button up here because my axis is in world space. If I change it to that, it's in local. Now I can slide it along the length of this. So let's get it up. Let's get it back to where it was. Oh. Yeah, that seems about right. Yeah, that'll do. Then we can go back into world space and drag it along this way. Same with this one. I'm going to grab that. We obviously have some kind of a turn here. Can't quite see because it's behind. I think it's actually about there somewhere, but I'm just going to put that there. Then I'm going to drag this out. I'm not going to be too accurate with this. I just need it to, be here all day if I do. Turn this off. Make that back down there. Yeah, I'd say that that's where the wall starts to turn. Put that there. There we go. So this back wall is in there now. And obviously, if I render that, it's going to look mental. So we can actually call this plane wall. Put that in our hierarchy, and it receives the same, projection from this tag because, we put that on our null. So you render this now. It blends straight in. Now, let's have a look at our lighting. I'm going to hide the background, come out of the projection. So this wall is now got that photo projected on it, and that, gives me a clue about the scene as well. I'm just going to go to projection, turn off colour and turn on luminance, so this is a little bit clearer in our viewport. Okay, so the sky object. Let's go back to the skies compositing tag, turn it on. Okay, so I know there's a table, you've got the chair there, there's the window. Let's have a look at our scene. Now that's there. Okay, that's all the way over there, which doesn't marry up with our scene, so we need to rotate our sky pretty much. So I'm going to zoom out. This is the direction in which I should be viewing the chair. And obviously the opposite way is where I should be viewing the dining room table and the opposite window. So let's spin our sky until we see the dining room table. There we go, there we go. And there's the window in the background there. Perfect. Go back to our sky, seen by camera, we'll turn that off. Now this sky object is the thing that's going to be lighting our scene. But for it to do that, we need to turn on global illumination. So let's go to our render settings, effect, global illumination. We've got a radiance cache as our primary method, and no secondary method. We'll just leave that as it is for now, and we'll go back to our camera. We'll go back into it, take a render. So now you can see this box is being lit by the scene, but you can see the floor isn't taking any shadow from the box or anything like that, and that's because, remember a minute ago, just so I could see this more clearly in the viewport, I turned back on the luminance channel in our projection material. Now, a material that has something in the luminance is basically saying, well, it's luminant. It can't take shadow information because it's self-lit. So with our projection material, we need for our texture to be in this color channel. Okay, so let's close this and try again. Now, as you can see, our cube looks a little bit more grounded now on the floor. Although we could probably, let's have a look. In fact, so the wall in the background, you can see it taking the lighting information there, and it's, you can see the edge actually here, and it's because we haven't made this wall yet. But you can see how it's going to blend in. Now, obviously, the reason we need this wall is because if we wanted to put any dynamic objects in there and we were just using the background, there'd be nothing for it to react off of. Same with this table, actually. So let me delete this cube and create another cube, as we did a minute ago. 50 by 50. Now, this table, for instance, let's say this table, we want to build this table. You've got to be very careful about how you go about this. If I say lift this off the floor and go, right, let's build this table, I'm going to put it there. I'm going to match the bottom of this line up here and match that there. We whack this cube in our thing like this. We'll call this table, this cube. Now, because I've lifted it off the floor and then lined it up with what I think is going on, if we come out of this projection camera, we can see that it's not doing what we thought it was. Even though from our view here, it looks like, yeah, that lines up and it's sitting on the floor and all the rest of it. It's not. We've lifted it up off the floor. So we've got to be very careful about that kind of thing. So if I did want to make this table, which I do, let's get this back on the floor again. That's actually now on the floor, as you can see here. So we don't want to move it in the Y direction. To match it, we want to slide it along here and along there. Okay, and if we come out of it now, there, it is taking the side of the table, which is a lot more accurate. Okay, so match it up there. Let's make it editable. I'm gonna go into my rectangle selection, only select visible elements I'm going to turn off and turn on tolerance selection. We'll see the wireframe for it. If you remember that, the shortcuts for that is NG to see the wireframe and NB to go back to the ground shading. So I'm going to go into point mode. I'm going to select the, dearie me, select the bridge tool by accident then. There we go. Select these points, go back into my other view. I can slide these along until they match the edge of the table. And go into polygon mode and select the top polygon. And then I can shift that down until it matches the top of the table. Then if I come out of this view, so I can grab the back polygon and then go back in and slide it up here. Now you can actually see that there's some shift there. It's not actually quite meeting the edge of the table. And that's because we've assumed that this table is straight, and it might not be. And in this case it isn't. So if we need to rotate the thing, actually, until we get something that's a little bit more accurate for us. In fact, because this has been shaded in the viewport, I'm going to change my projection material back to luminance, and then I can actually see what's going on a little bit more accurately. There we go. That's probably a little bit more realistic. There we go. So it's actually meeting the edge of the table now. It's taking the table texture on there. Now what I'd do is I'd make a cut there, make a cut here, make sure the bottom's hollowed out, but you can see now how we're applying how we're projecting this material out of a camera to fit onto our geometry. Now, this isn't a tutorial about modelling, so I'm not going to have you sit here and watch me model this entire room. So I'm going to pause here, and then when we come back, we can see what I've come up with. Okay, guys, we're back. Now, I've actually built the entire geometry of the room. I haven't been super careful about it or anything like that, but just to show you what the geometry looks like, let's dump this on the background for now. There we go. So here's my group. I've called it room. I think it was scene items before, and I've just made these quite low poly objects. So I've made all the walls, made the fireplace, the little, I've called it cat thing. It's their scratching post stroke home that they never use. And we've got a table with a MacBook on it. And all of that other stuff. So if I close that down and put the projection material back onto it, you can see how it all lines up with that projection. As before, we already lined our sky up. I don't think. Yeah, okay, good. Okay, cool. Now, render settings. I've made a slight change here. I've just changed the secondary method to a radiance cache, and then they've asked for the diffuse depth, and I've put 2. So basically, we get a primary bounce, and that's calculated using this, and then our secondary method is this, and I've said that we want a diffuse depth is pretty much the amount of bounces, so I've changed that to 2. Okay, so now when we render, obviously before we didn't have walls to bounce off of them, we had limited geometry, but because I've made everything and we've got the in fact, let's get out of this view. You can see the scene completely. There you go. You're probably wondering why I've made walls to this floor. That'll become apparent in a minute. So we've got our walls in our view, little fireplace, sofa. It's not the most beautifully modelled sofa, but it matches up with our projection. I mean, the MacBook's basically a box with a little extrude on it. The table is now, you know, in the shape of a table, and this is very low version of the chair in the corner there. So if I go back to this, lob the material back on, there we go. And we've got our sky in there, we've got our GI settings. So let's have a look at the render. If I render this out now, right, you can see that the pre-pass is calculating all those objects, and voila, we're actually getting a result from that. There we go. Let's check the projection is. Yep, it's in the colour channel, which it should be. The background is in the luminance. Yep, that's good. And let's actually see what our output side for the final render is. Okay, let's crush that down a little bit. And just go for the current frame. Save. No, we don't want to save that yet. Okay, yes, just so it renders quicker, we'll say that's 800. Okay, so render to the picture viewer. And there we go. So it looks like our photo, but we've actually got geometry in there. So what's the advantage of doing that? Well, the advantage of doing that is the fact that I can put this little tag on. In fact, I'll take it off and put it back on again. If I go to right click on my room, null object, go down to simulation tags, rigid body. So now we've got a rigid body on the room. Now we don't want it to be a rigid body, because if I press play, it will fall away, and we don't want that. So what we actually want it to be is right click, go down to simulation and collider body, and then if we go to the collision tab, its shape is automatic, which is no good, because it will try and optimize the shape of the collision shape, sorry. So this table, for instance, it won't see this cut out underneath. It will just make it a box collision. So if you wanted anything to go under it, it won't be able to, because it will basically draw a collision shape across this hole here. So it's just trying to be as optimized as possible, but in this case we don't want it to be. So we're going to change this to static mesh, because none of the meshes inside this null object, all this stuff, are going to be moving, and it needs to be calculated correctly. So we'll do that. In the inherit tag, we're just going to say apply tag to children. So basically it makes this tag apply to everything in this hierarchy. So we do that. Let's go back to our projection camera. Right, let's get some other dynamic objects in there. I'm going to go to simulate particles, and then we're going to choose this emitter. It creates this emitter here at the top. If I lob a couple of balls in there, okay, let's get another one in there. Now the segments on this are quite high. There's going to be a few of these. So if you go to the Object tab, you can select both spheres and drop this down to, I don't know. Actually, yeah, it might be alright at 24 there. Let's drop it down to 18, something like that. Maybe even 16. We've got this render perfect button on, so even though this looks quite jaggedy on the edge there, if you press render, the thing will render perfect. Although they're not going to be in our scene at the moment, because they're inside this emitter. If I drag this out and then render, you should see it. But can you see the edge of the edge of it is actually perfect? It's been worked out properly. So let's wipe that back in here. Might go back to 18 just so they roll a little bit better. Okay, so they're in our emitter object. Where's this emitter going to go? So let's come out of the camera. I want to... the emitter always emits its balls in the Z direction, in the positive Z. So I'm going to drag this over here, drag this over here. The sphere's moving with it because it's a child of it, but don't worry about that. So I'm going to put that at 90 degrees, do that, put it up. And I'm going to bung that in the fireplace here. And then I'm actually going to change the size of the emitter. So let's have a look. Yep, that'll do. 250 by 250. Yeah, that'll do us nicely. If we press play now, you're not going to see a lot happening. You're going to see the particles that it's emitting. So what you've got to do is go back to the particle tab, go down to show objects. Okay, so now they're coming out. But the objects that are coming out of it aren't dynamic. So let's, first of all, let's sort out the size of these things. I don't know, 27, some arbitrary number. That'll do us. Yeah, there they go. So they're coming out now. I've created these two materials to put on our objects as well, just to let you know. Balls red and balls green. In the reflectance channel, I've just added a GXG or reflection type, and then all I've done is come down to the layer Fresnel, turned it to a dielectric, and given it an index of refraction of 1.35. And I've done that for both materials, apart from this one's red and the other one's green. So I'm going to drag the red onto one of these spheres, I'm going to drag the green onto the other one. And we've got our colours going on. But again, we need some dynamic stuff. So if we right click on our spheres with them both selected, go down to simulation tags, rigid body. There we go. And now they should fly out of the fireplace there and interact with our objects. Not only interact with our objects, but let's just render this quickly. In fact, let's render to the picture viewer, because it'll be way more accurate. You can actually see that because they're being lit by GI and there's geometry under it, if it was just a background plate underneath them, you wouldn't get any of these shadows, because they'd literally be sitting on top of a plate. But because we've made geometry and then added a compositing tag to that geometry, this is why it can receive shadows and still look like it's, you know, naturally there. So I'm going to make a few more tweaks to this. So they're coming out. Lovely. Just hit the microphone. So first of all, let's go to the emitter. The birth rate, let's make this a bit higher, 32 and 32. So this is the birth rate in the editor, and this is the birth rate in the renderer. You want to keep those the same if you want the, you know, what you're seeing here to be representative of what's happening in the final render. So we've got a load there. So it should kick out. Yeah, there you go. You're seeing them, lovely. Okay, something else I want to change in the emitter is the start emission, stop emission. So I'm going to say, I don't know, stop emission at 10 seconds. We'll give the the timeline's already got 15 seconds on it. So you can see the spitting them out. You might notice your scene start to slow down as it, yeah, there you go, as it starts to chug. One thing that can help that is actually, if you come down into our emitter tab, we've got this render instances. Let's open up the help. Here we go. Enable this option if the objects generated by the emitter should be optimized with regards to memory usage, i.e. an almost infinite amount of renderable render instance should be rendered. So basically, instead of having to calculate the geometry for every single ball that comes out of here, it only calculates the geometry once for one of these balls, and then applies the same thing to every other object. So you should see it run a lot quicker now, which is always handy. Yeah, there you go. It doesn't seem to be chugging on its own balls as badly. Lovely. And then it stops at 10, and there you go. Okay. So, what are the lifetime of these objects? Well, it's 20 seconds, so that's over our 15 seconds of timeline, so that's absolutely fine. We can actually, this is the speed, so this is the speed they'll come out of the fireplace there. So I've made them come out a little bit quicker. You could even ramp this up to 2000. I mean, this is going to be ridiculous probably, but yeah, there you go. So we've got some bullets going on there, so I'm just going to crank this down to 500. This end scale, I'm going to whack the variation up here by 50%. So the end scale is 1, which means that it will stay the same size that is defined by the actual objects. So the sphere size is 27 centimeters. They start at that and they will end at that. I'm going to give it a 50% variation. So as it, you can see that there's some variation in size now by 50%. So that's beautiful. But if we did actually change this end scale to say 3, they will gradually get bigger through the as the timeline gets to nearer the end. They will be 3 times the size they originally were, and you can see them slowly getting bigger there, and that's mental. Okay, good. So we probably don't want that. So let's just get some balls in the scene. Let's take a render of that. Now, I should say the advantage of doing this way, in a previous tutorial, which was about the motion tracker, we had a bit of video footage and we tracked it, and then we could put 3D objects into our video footage. The one drawback that has is that you're trapped by the video's camera. So wherever the camera goes, obviously you're going, because you better make sure you got the footage that you want. But this is where the advantage of this comes in, because not so much in this scene, but because I've projected the image onto actual geometry, when I come out of this view, I can now decide to have a different view. I could come here if I wanted to and render this. Yeah, let's just stop that. So I can actually have one camera projecting here, then I could just create another camera in the scene. And I could even animate that camera and move it around the scene. So just from a photo, I've created an environment where I can pick and choose my shots. Although using this method, you have to be careful about how you're picking and choosing your shots, because if I come into the scene here and come out of this camera for a minute and then go here, you can obviously see that this table, this geometry is still, receiving the table texture, but the other side of it, it's still the table. And that's because it's a flat image. It has no information about the floor behind this object. So you're still going to get it there, unless you do some pretty heavy Photoshop work. And there's actually a method of doing this in Cinema 4D, where it's kind of it's the same principle really as what we're doing here, but it's using something in Cinema 4D called Projection Man, and I will be going over that in another tutorial. So that's something else we can take a look at. But if we go back to the picture viewer, you can see here that just from that other shot, we're projecting out of this view, and I'm managing to get a render out of this view, which looks, for all intents and purposes, pretty convincing. So that's not bad at all, really. Just on a little note that I forgot to bring up. I'm going to cancel this render. Let's rewind this just so there's a few, not too many, coming out there. There we go. In my render settings for physical renderer, I've switched on motion blur. Now if I turn this off and just give this a quick zhuzh, there we go, it builds up the scene, it renders it out, and there's our balls. And obviously if you're going to be rendering out every frame of this, without motion blur, it's going to be very easy to tell that those objects aren't real, because of what our eyes are used to seeing. When we see video footage, we're used to seeing the disadvantages of having a camera shutter. So if we turn on motion blur and then render, these balls here should have a slight blur on them, like you would actually get on film, due to the fact that cameras have rolling shutters on them. So obviously it takes a little bit more calculation, and there you go, you can see that we have blur around this object because it has moved, and it definitely sells the illusion a lot better. So anyway, that's my tutorial in camera projection and how you can build up a scene using nothing but a photograph and actually sell it quite well and it be quite convincing. Don't forget to check out the website at digitalmeet.uk, also the Facebook page, Digital Meet 3D, and the YouTube channel as well. So I think that's everything, guys. Okay, bye.